Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video diving into screenshots I took from the 4th gameplay stream covering Ways of War, which is the next expansion for Age of Wonders 4 and is coming out November 5th. Just like I've done with the previous gameplay streams by the devs, I went through and took screenshots of all the interesting numbers and mechanics that popped up for a few seconds so that we can look at them together. I will have timestamps below, so if you want to jump to any particular topic or concept, you can do so. I will also be posting these images to the official Age of Wonders 4 forum, so if you want to look at them with me, you can use the link in the description below. Important disclaimer, a lot of the numbers we will be looking at today are from relatively early versions of Age of Wonders 4. The devs recently announced that there will be at least 2 more DLCs for Age of Wonders 4 after Ways of War, so these numbers are likely going to change quite significantly. This first screenshot here is from the very beginning of the dev stream from Thursday, and I have to say I really like the little hat that Jordy's wearing, and I also really like the little title that they gave him. He's the final boss of Discord. Both of these developers are very active on Discord, and they end up um, posting a lot of images that I end up including here that aren't from the dev streams or the dev diaries. I think it is also worth mentioning that I do have quite a few images this week from the dev diary. Dev diary 37 was a lot. I covered it for about 30 minutes and I feel like I still missed about half of the really interesting details in these screenshots. For example, there's a really good one in here where they show off what you can get for the dragon rulers at the different levels. Their signature skills are quite different. So I wanted to take a closer look at that as well as all of the little information in the Behemoth document by just going over to here and zooming in a little bit. I think it's going to be pretty grainy, so bear with me. There's a lot to look at, and in the middle here has the archetypes, which they have better images for us to look at later. I've got those set up over here so that we can like take a look at the defender in more detail. I think we'll save that towards the end of the video here. We won't cover all of these little design documents before diving into the screenshots from the stream because I think generally speaking those are very interesting, more interesting to more people. But I also wanted to cover that they've got like this area over here for skills that haven't made their way into the new system, the new hero rework. These are old hero skills or things that you'd get from tomes that haven't quite made it their way in. I don't think we can really make out the details on each of these screenshots because of how grainy they came out in the behemoth image that they posted. I know, Winsley, you shouldn't just zoom in on here. It says don't look here, but I find that tempting. That makes me want to zoom in here and take a closer look. This is them talking a little bit about some of the design things that still need to be addressed. They want to make feudal better because the hero skills that they got were pretty good. That was one of the better things that the feudal culture had access to. They also wanted to do something with wizard kings here so that they have their culture hero skill applied. They want to review the loadouts because some of the ones from the Pantheon are just better, and maybe that means they need to add a point, one skill point at the beginning of the game. I like that idea. Pretty interesting. This is something that's really easy to miss. There are new dragon claws. They've already mentioned that. There are new dragon loadouts that are associated with the different affinities, and then they have these loadouts associated with the sovereign's weapon types. And what else can we talk about here? There's, culture skills, feudal, and stuff like that has been placed over here in the top. Unused abilities, signature skills, and affinity hero skills. I think that's pretty much everything that we can talk about in this. There's a little bit of breakdown of what you would get in each thing so that the numbers line up with each other. Yeah, there's 39 skills here, 34, 31, 34 here. But if we go back to this document, the next one that I have is actually something else that I'm going to need to go over to the side here and paint to bring up in more detail. This is the dragon ruler things that we mentioned earlier. It looks like this says dragon scales to me, and dragon scales and draconic health, I think is what this is saying, got kind of moved into the signature skill. This is the free stuff that you get for just getting to level 4, and this doesn't require a hero skill in order to get these bonuses. It will unlock 2 choices that you can get just like any other signature skill. And I think that this order aspect works like the initiate of order. It will give you the same 2 choices. So this is basically saying you're going to get some HP, some defense, some resistance, regardless of which aspect you choose. But then you're going to get things like adjacent friendly units get resistance if you go for the order aspect. And this is all stuff that we've actually seen before, so I'm not going to spend too much time looking at the resistances. It looks like Shadow Breath attack was inflict 60% and 90% with the upgrade. Charge charged and slowed instead of frozen as a base. Interesting. I'm not sure if I understand what that's getting at. The transformations, I think, are all things we've actually gone to see as well. This is elemental, this is undead and create zombies. This is ethereal, whereas the chaos one is a fiend type. It can redefine your guys' um, unit type, or you can take the primal transformation. I think they've changed this a few times so that now he gets just a little bit more HP and does not change unit type. He can still just be like a fire breathing dragon if that's what you want him to be. Now, I'm not sure which one of the breaths have been shown off and which ones haven't, so we will just take a second to look at each of them. This says, regardless of which one you take, you're getting a little bit more HP. You're getting 30 more HP, and that's a lot. That'll help it compete with the guys who are able to get really good gear in the mid to late game, like the Wizard Kings and the Champions. They can equip more things. Pure Breath does spirit damage. If non-order dragon, I'll just turn a little bit into spirit damage. Friendly units are healed 25 HP and lose all negative status effects is really, really good, especially if you can use this fairly frequently, because there are not a lot of things that can clear negative status effects and all negative status effects in an AoE. So very nice. The Inferno Breath creates burning on the ground, guaranteed burning on units that are hit with it. The breath weapons deal more damage, and it increases size, which all of these are going to do. The Astral says that you're going to get more damage out of your breath weapons. It'll guarantee electrified on units that are hit, and there's a very good chance that they're going to be blinded, which is going to synergize really well with the new Tome of Shadows, or not. Is it Shadows or Shade? I think it might be Tome of Shade actually, with the new Shade unit. Rust Breath is going to guarantee Sunder defense and um, inflict weakened. They will make enemy units lose all their positive stats effects, which is very useful because a lot of people like to sit back and just stack up all those buffs before getting into a fight. Life Breath will revive slain friendly units with 30% HP. That's probably the best. That seems really, really good. Just being able to continuously bring back your guys with 30% HP sounds nice, but I guess that could hurt you in terms of morale if those units are just then taken out very quickly on the next turn. Heals friendly units 20 HP, so that might help you keep those beat up units alive. Frost Breath says that there is a 90% to basically freeze with this one. It's quite good at freezing an enemy, so that's what you get out of Frost Breath. Now we're getting into the really interesting stuff, which they haven't shown off much in the streams or the dev diaries. The Elder of Order is going to make it so that friendly units get control loss immunity at start of turn. They gain a little bit morale. The Elder of Chaos will make fire hazard immunity on kill fire. Yeah, we've seen this one. This one will make it so you do more fire damage for killing units. The Elder of Astral will make it so that your guys get wind barrier and storm call, which I think we actually got to see in one of the other ones. So we won't spend too much time looking at this, but this does displace, applies electrified, and um, it affects the adjacent enemy units. Elder of Materium will give you plus 5 HP in combat, plus 5 HP per turn in combat until the end of combat. So he just keeps getting stronger and stronger. Rather, they keep getting more HP, which doesn't make them do more damage, but it will make it harder for you to remove an Elder of Materium Dragon from the battlefield. They also get Juggernaut, Unstoppable, and gain immunity to slow and immobilize, which means they should be able to move pretty easily around the map. They can like stomp down obstacles. They can just avoid the slowing from terrain. Actually, dragons, they can fly over the foliage, so that shouldn't be a giant problem for them. When casting a non-attack ability, all friendly units gain 10 HP for the Elder of Nature. It doesn't seem that great. That seems kind of um, bad compared to, I don't know, getting more HP or becoming control loss immune. Control loss immunity is very big. That means they can't get insanidied, I believe, or mind controlled. Now, Elder Shadow says that this unit will gain Undying, which is, I think, the thing that returns them to the battlefield after 2 turns in combat. When a unit dies, this unit gains 10 temporary HP, which can be a good way to heal up your dragon and just keep them alive. It's very similar to the Elder Materium. Just having more HP gives them a lot more staying power on the battlefield. Okay, now we're done looking at this design board. We can go back to the list of things from either Discord or from the stream itself. I believe this image was actually posted by a voxel in the Discord, and it says basically these are the different governor things that you can get on your heroes. I believe the Godir governor is just what you're going to get on your main person. They're all going to be able to get plus 20 food income at renown level 0, and then at higher levels they can get it so that the population costs less to grow a pop, and then you can get more Imperium for each wizard tower structure built in your city. And the third, or yeah, I guess the last level says units produced in the governed city get +1 rank, which is really nice. Getting +1 rank is a lot of difference in the power level, and just having your units built with that extra rank makes a giant difference. The recruiting governor, I think, is going to be one of the most popular because of this interaction. Units produced in the governed city get +1 rank at the level 2 renown and at level 3 renown, which means that they're going to just get twice as much of this bonus, the extra XP that you get as the governing goater after they have leveled up their renown levels, which requires them following their ambitions, which I think will be easier for some ambitions than others, but I don't really know at this point. I still have to play around with these things myself. Units in the governed city cost 20% less gold to recruit, and the governed city will get plus 30 draft. Also helps with recruiting units, but it's just not the main selling point of the recruiting governor. The recruiting governor giving extra ranks on their units is really, really good, and probably one of the better options you can get in here. The industrious governor will really like quarries, and they will get +5 production for each quarry in the city. Quarries at the next level of renown will no longer affect stability in the governed city, which is really big because stability can get really negatively impacted from all the little provinces that are attached to larger cities. And if they're all quarries with a industrious governor, then all of a sudden that malice doesn't come into play and you just get a lot of production. Structures in the governed city will be easier to build. They'll take less gold, and I think the same amount of production at level 2. And on the third level and the last level, governed cities will get +2 gold for each city structure. If I remember correctly, I think I saw Cody comment something about this being really, really low. Only +2 for each city structure makes it almost not worth having. If you had +4, then I think it would be arguably a lot better. But +2 is just such a small amount for what could be the late game. Agricultural governor says that they want a lot of farms and they want to grow a massive city. This just makes it like with the industrious one, you want to have farms inside the city, so you get +5 food for each farm inside a city. Then similar to what the industrious one, the second level says that the stability is not affected. In fact, if you compare this to the mines here and the mana, this is all very, very similar at renown level 0 and renown level 1. But I think at level 2, this is where it starts to get a bit different. So governed cities get +1 gold, mana, and knowledge for each population. So having more populations in the food growing one is really good. And then at the next level, cost of getting a new population in governed city is reduced by 30%, which is similar to what you get on your main ruler at renown level 1. I think this is probably arguably better than all the other renown level ones, and you want to try and get that relatively quickly so that your main city can grow and get the boost it needs to um, just keep growing at a relatively strong rate compared to everybody else across the map. Now we have the prospecting governor, which is for mines. At the second level, governed cities get +2 gold income per population. So you do want population in the cities that have prospecting governors, but that doesn't mean that you should ignore mines. You're probably going to need a mixture of mines and things that help you grow, like food from farms. Governed cities get 10% more gold is nice. Gold is always very useful, and the fact that the arcane governor gives you pretty much the same thing, mana for each pop and 10% more mana income, makes a lot of sense when you compare these two. The scholarly governor is once again very similar, +2 knowledge for each population inside the city, and then the governed city can generate 10% more income at this last level of renown. Then the nautical governor says water improvements grant +5 food in the governed city's domain. Raiding provinces is the next one says raiding provinces in the governed city's domain takes 2 more turns. Wait a minute. I hadn't seen that before. That's really cool. That's really interesting. So people who reduce the time to pillage will actually have to take some turns to burn down a city if they have a nautical governor. And it doesn't matter if you're raiding the water provinces or not. I think it's any province. Very cool. The next one says water provinces grant +2 mana income in the domain of the governed city. So yeah, once you get to renown level 2, that's what you get here from nautical governor. At level 3, the water improvements give you extra gold in the city's domain +3. So I guess all these numbers are supposed to be similar to each other, but they just seem a little bit low for the late game. But I'm not sure how early how early you can really unlock these. So this might not be supposed to be for the late game, but rather something that you can get to relatively early, depending on how the ambitions go. Next, the specialist governor says specialist province improvements SBIs cost 20% less gold and production to build in the governed city. One of these other things only reduced gold, but not the production. That's interesting that this is going to do both. I think that'll make it a lot easier to build the special province improvements. And then next, special province improvements do not affect stability is very similar to the way the mines, farms, and quarries work in these other similar governor roles. And then governed cities get +5 knowledge for each special province improvement in its domain at this level. Seems quite nice. That's a lot of knowledge, actually, especially if you're able to get a lot of special provinces in your city. That could be like +15, +20, +25 relatively early in the game. Um, Governed city gains +2 mana and gold for each special province improvement. Yeah, so if you're getting knowledge out of this, it's probably gonna be pretty easy for you to take this to the renown level 3 and get some gold and mana out of this specialist governor too. The fortifying governor is one that I would assume makes your cities harder to knock down. Defense structures cost 25% gold, and production is once again very similar to the specialist governor. There's some interesting parallels between a lot of these different governor roles. The next thing for the governor, the fortifying governor, is governed cities gain +10 stability for each defensive structure, and then on level 2, governed cities get +10 draft for each defensive structure, making it easier to build up your armies. This will just make your cities a little bit better economically for putting in some things to try and delay your opponent. So there's some nice little trade-off there. And then the last one says governed cities suffer no penalties from being besieged or having pillaged provinces is really good because I think it's -50% income on your cities that are being besieged. I kind of wish that you could put that on your capital, but from my understanding, the go-tier governor is just in charge of the capital, and this would be like for your other cities outside of the capital. Okay, now that we're done with this image, we're ready to move on to a few more from the dev diary and from Discord. I know we're about 20 minutes into this video and I still haven't talked that much about screenshots from the dev stream itself, but there really was a lot of great information that the devs put on Discord and that they put in the dev diary, but I missed on my first pass of covering that dev diary. I don't believe I mentioned much about the fact that the cleansing flame herald, the thing that you would get on the hero skill from the tome of cleansing flame, is working a bit differently than all those other hero skills in my dev diary coverage, so I wanted to make sure I covered that here. This is now a passive that you just get when you get the tome, and that is fairly unique. Most of the other stuff like that are going to be moved over to other places like signature skills. Next thing we have here is a question about ascended governors, and they work a lot like go-tier governors, but they're slightly different. What it's saying here is at the first level, it's level 0, the governed city gets plain +20 food income. That's, I think, exactly what the go-tier governors get. And then next we get the population growth is reduced. I believe that is the same. And after that, you get the governed city generates 1 gold, mana, and knowledge for each population. That's different than the Imperium. So you don't get Imperium for the ascended governors, but you do get something pretty neat here. That's like +3 instead of the +2 that you get on the um, what's this? The prospecting governor. And then units produced in that city get +1 rank is the same as the last level of the Godir governor. Now, the next set of images that we have here have to do with this new cult of personality society trait, which you can unlock in the Pantheon if you have Pantheon points and the new Ways of War expansion. This basically says that if you take the society trait, you can have more heroes in your army, and you can also have the better Pantheon heroes, which I think before this trait, you could only have one in each of your single player playthroughs that would try and join your empire if things aren't going well. But if you have the +3 hero cap, that will allow you to get 4 heroes with special traits because they're from your Pantheon. I think the ones in your Pantheon actually get the ascended uh, ruler tag so that they can actually get these governor bonuses, the ascended governance bonuses that are listed right here, but I could be wrong because I haven't played around with that yet. Now, I know that Zombie sent me these images with the stuff underlined because he was saying that he thinks Pantheon heroes should be available in multiplayer. At least he got that impression from this discussion being Thomas and Michelle. But then in the most recent dev stream, it seemed like Jordy was saying that Pantheon heroes are currently unavailable in multiplayer. And as the QA like person, I think I feel like this makes sense based off of his role, that he would understand how this stuff interacts, and from a multiplayer's perspective, those Pantheon heroes can really swing the game in an unfair way. So I think it makes a lot of sense that they would be disabled, but I don't know, maybe they are enabled with this new society trait. The next thing that they showed off was the new the first thing, really one of the first things that they showed off was this new sword and crossbow weapon type that you can make in the item forge. I believe there are 3 cultures that can start with this one. I think high culture was one of them, feudal culture was another, and then maybe dark was the other one. But I believe any culture should be able to craft this because they were playing as the new culture, the Oathsworn, when they saw this item appear in their item forge, and it works slightly differently. I think it has slightly higher damage. It doesn't breach. Um, but it has a lot of similar actions to the sword and pistol. It's got I think 3 range on its range attack, and it has the ability to use melee strikes, so it's kind of like a skirmisher in a lot of senses. Voxel mentioned that he wanted to have maybe javelin weapons for heroes at some point because he really likes the sunderer javelin throw, and we don't have javelins for heroes yet, but they have the animation, so it could make a lot of sense. Kind of like how we have the new monk animation. If you have it on units, you can, I think, pretty easily take it over to the heroes themselves. Now we have some some screenshots from the skirmisher tree that I don't believe we've seen before, or rather this is from the ranger class, but there's a skirmisher part of the ranger class. The ranger training is going to give your hero slippery and swift, which I think allows you to avoid slowing effects from terrain, and also you can move away from enemies more easily. Slipaway is one of my favorite effects in the game. The fact that it keeps your units alive is super nice, super helpful, because that just means that they can stay on the battlefield a little bit longer, and that in turn can allow your heroes to either attack an enemy they otherwise wouldn't have, or use an ability they otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And because of how useful heroes can be in the battlefield, that can really turn around a fight that you were going to lose and make it one that you can win if you get very lucky with like your slipaways. Sometimes the slipaway will put you next to an enemy unit that can kill them on the next turn, but even in that situation, even in the worst case situation for slipaway, that does require the enemy to put in more actions to remove that unit, and that can mean that slipaway is very efficient across the board. Next, we have evasive strikes that says melee attacks no longer trigger retaliations, and that means that you can move your skirmisher hero next to something that does a lot of damage on the retaliations, like a charge unit, and not worry about that charge unit deleting that guy's health bar. But the tricky thing about that is you don't want to put yourself too close to enemy melee units, because on their own turn, they don't use retaliations. They can just triple attack you if they have repeating attacks, or just attack right into you, which can delete units if you're not careful. So I don't know how much I love evasive strikes. It just looks really interesting. Retaliation, I think, is from the defender tree. Yeah, it says here on the bottom that it comes from the left side of the defender tree, and I think it's relatively far down. Getting an extra retaliation attack is pretty useful, and it's supposed to be for the defender class because if you had that on charge weapons, that would allow you to do a lot of damage during the opponent's turn. So that's just a little discussion that they had during stream that I thought I'd bring over here. Uh, Versatile skirmisher has to do with the ranger class again. This one says melee strikes grant prepared shot for 2 turns, and physical range attacks make a prepared strikes for 2 turns. So you want to switch back and forth between melee strikes and range strikes if you take the versatile skirmisher. I'm not sure how this affects your range attacks and your melee strikes, but I assume it's just like 10 or 20% more extra damage. The knockback retaliation says melee retaliations now knock back a target 1 hex, which is really, really, really good if you have first strike. I think some people were saying this would be amazing if you can give a unit the ability to strike people before they can hit you and then push them back and then they just don't get to use their turn. Especially if you can give yourself a lot of retaliations through things like the retaliation. I can't remember which tree this one was on exactly. It might be the ranger, it might be defender, it might be one of the other ones, but I think we'll be able to discuss that more when we get to the design documents, the design boards from the dev diary at the end of this. But yeah, no, it's just generally a pretty cool one. The flanking skirmisher says that you get plus 20% more damage on flanking attacks, and I think that it would probably pair well with one of the form traits. There's a form trait that lets you do more damage when you're flanking, as well as a transformation. I think the Tome of Beasts gives you a transformation that gives you something similar, so that your cavalry units can flank, and also your animal units, I think, get the flanking effect, which is, I believe, plus 25% more damage. Thorn Shot is from the Ranger class. You can kind of see here all the options for the Ranger class. Thorn Shot says that attacks now have a 60% chance of inflicting bleeding on all enemies in a 1 hex radius. Anything? Oh, okay. Effects are increased for non-repeating attacks. I think that should apply to these 3 at the top as well as your normal attacks. That's quite interesting because I think bleed was one of those ones that people undervalued or thought wasn't as good as some of the other ones. But if you have more ability to apply it, that could end up elevating bleeding to be better in terms of the other debuffs. Now, Killshot says killing an enemy resets all ability cooldowns, can only be triggered once per turn. When I saw this, I thought of the snapshot ability. I think in the middle here, there's a snapshot that's a free action. So you can get a free action kill that I think gives you the action back to then take that snapshot on another unit. It seems quite good, but I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding how this kill shot's supposed to work. My cat's trying to join us. All right, so for sniper focus, if this hero is not engaged, you can see her tail. Sit down, kitty. If this hero is not engaged in melee, when its turn starts, then it gains +1 range on its physical range attacks until it moves. Is really interesting. It sounds really good. That means that not the snapshot, but the I think it's true shot that is I want to say 6 or 7 range can go up to either 7 or 8 range depending on how much range you get on that at the basic level. But the trick here is that you need to sit still, and if you've got a full action attack like the true shot, then you're going to be sitting still anyways. I believe there was one that gives you more accuracy. There's this one that gives you more range, and then there is killing an enemy grants the here 2 strengthened and 2 regeneration. Yeah, I think actually I saw that when I was looking at the design board. So specialist governor says that yeah, you get +2 mana and +2 gold at the level 4 renown level, and Cody was saying it should really be like +5 gold and mana. But that's like their opinion. We don't. I was it actually saying that in that document that I was showing off earlier. I thought it was just saying +2 gold, not gold and mana for the specialist governor. No, it's saying gold and mana. I just was remembering it wrong. All right, let's go back down to that little screenshot of the specialist governor, and we can move on to the quick phase, which is something I want to say from the mage class. I think they showed off the mage class towards the end of the stream, so we got a few images that have to do with them here. And one of the more interesting ones is you have this quick phase, which is a free action move away from the enemy that can allow you to get 3 repeating attacks or full action attack from a different position. And I think I saw some people saying that if you combine that with the Eldritch Sovereign's ability to phase around the map, that could be very strong, could be very, very powerful. Let's actually just take a second to zoom out to make sure you can see everything, because I'm starting to notice here that it's clipped off the side. So yeah, this next image is for the fire evocation. You can choose either the fire evocation on the left here or the lightning evocation on the right. The fire evocation does a little bit less damage because in theory it should be able to hit more units given that it's a 1 hex radius, and the lightning evocation jumps between this unit and 3 other units within 3 hexes. So that should be 4 units that it can target, whereas the 1 hex radius should be the center plus the 6 around it. So in general, you should be able to hit 7 units with the fire evocation, but it's a little bit harder to get all 7 or to be able to hit 7 enemy units in a clump than it is to get the damage to jump between a few that are standing near each other. The pyromancy is the ability underneath the fire evoker, I want to say, that says that you can add burning to your magic abilities, and then I believe there should be one for evoker too, or for the lightning thing that does something similar. I think this one was fire and this one is lightning from what I remember. Then devastating evocation says modify and enhance this hero's evocation. The fire evocation now deals 30 fire damage, or the lightning evocation does 35 lightning damage. That would be, I think, actually the one right here, and then I think maybe if you take the one to the right, that might work a bit differently. Cascading evolution says modify and enhance fire evocation, so the fire evocation cascades to adjacent enemies um, and is repeated. It will inflict burning and deal +5 damage. I guess it can't affect something that's already triggered on it, because I feel like based on reading this, I could see it triggering on one unit, going to one unit, and going back, and then going back and forth until those units are dead. I don't believe that's how fire evocation would work. That seems a little bit too strong. Lightning evocation says it's now a debuff ability. It will inflict sundered defense and sundered resistance, whereas before it was just electrifying. I think beforehand, in the previous versions of Ages Wonders 4, Lightning Evoker did less damage and was more of a debuff ability, but now they've kind of split it into 2 other things so that you can customize the way your mage hero works. They also moved the frost stuff over to the right. They said that we've got the 3 magic affinities that are basically used to be in evocations, the fire, lightning, and frost, but the frost was moved over to its separate area. The curse is going to sunder defense, sunder resistance, weaken a unit from relatively far away. This reminds me of, I want to say, one of the tier 2 battle mages that can reduce status, excuse me, they can reduce defenses and resistances using something that can target from 6 hexes away and is an always hit. The Frost Curse says that it modifies the curse so it now deals 30 damage, and it will also have a 120% chance to freeze a unit. That's really good. I mean, if you're freezing a unit, you probably don't need to remove it from the the battle this turn. So having the Sunder defense and Sunder resistance go on that unit that you're trying to remove, or just take actions away, may not be the most efficient way to do this. But of course, you might just be targeting a high value target that you need to either kill or freeze, and you don't know if you're going to get the freeze. There may be like a 50% chance at the end of the day to actually freeze a tier 4 or tier 5 because they have a pretty high level of status resistance. The temporal plague is something with a 0 turn cooldown that says debuffs the target and all connected enemy units. They also have a 90% chance of being stunned and a 90% chance of the decay. This is a cooldown 0, and there's a few things with cooldown 0. I'm not sure if I'm understanding these things correctly because they seem quite powerful. I don't know if you can just use this over and over and over again to stun the entire enemy army, but that doesn't seem like that would be fair or the way I would expect this to work. Now we have Fan the Flames and Channeling Power. Fan the Flames says magic attacks and abilities will inflict burning for 3 turns to the targets with at least 1 stack of burning. So it's just a way to get more burning on things that are burning. Channel Power, I want to say, is in the middle here, and I think this is just general stat boosts. Channel Power was in a game previously. This now makes it so that you get plus 50% damage until the end of the turn, or magic attacks get plus 50% damage. Not any attack. It has to be specifically magic attacks that will deal 50% more damage. And I'm not sure if it only applies to this unit because I believe that's how channel power used to work, but I don't see it listed there in the description. It could be that it's for every magic attack across the battlefield, or it could be just for magic attacks from that unit, like I believe it used to work. Arcane Strength says magic attacks and debuffs will give you 10% more damage, 10% more accuracy, and you can ignore status resistance. As you can see here, there's nothing below it, so I believe it's one of these last few options you can choose for the mage. Displacement says, upon sustaining damage, this unit teleports to a random location within 2 hexes, enters defense mode, and gains evasion for 3 turns. Works once per turn. Wait, so you get that evasion for 3 turns, but that works once per turn? That's amazing. That's like slip away, but it just keeps happening. Okay, that's so good. I completely missed this when they were covering this in the stream. Electromancy is the one that I was remembering earlier. This is, I think, relatively high up in the tree. This can make it so that magic attacks and abilities have a chance to electrify. You can make it so that they burn, or I think electrify, or is actually, this might not be exclusive. I don't see a lock in between it right now and the other option. Um, but who knows, maybe I'm missing something. Maximize Magic says that magic attacks get 30% extra crit chance and plus 20% accuracy. I have to assume this means just on this unit, on this mage unit, or mage hero, or mage ruler. Distant Evocation is now here. Magic and debuff abilities gain +1 range. Now that seems really interesting. That seems really interesting because it's super good, but it's also relatively far down the tree. And I feel like that makes a lot of sense because being able to hit units from further away is generally very good, especially if you have good accuracy on those attacks. If they're always hit, if they're the AoE version of burning or fire evocation, then having that extra range is always good. But if it's something that has an accuracy check, it's less useful, I would say. Magecraft 2 says that you get extra accuracy, you can ignore status resistance, and I think that is different than the other one that we were just looking at that gave you accuracy. Yeah, Arcane Strength is this one down here. So this is like a lesser version of it. The Magecraft 2 will eventually lead to the Arcane Strength. Yes, Arcane Strength is what they called it. All right, cool. Now we're ready to move into intrigue events. So the devs actually started this event chain, the intrigue event here a few streams ago. It takes a while to accomplish these goals because I think from what I understand, they generally want you to go conquer another ruler's capital. And this one was the rebellion one where there was a prisoner in the capital, I believe, and they were saying, come take out the capital. And once the devs did that, they actually, no, they didn't actually accomplish it when they got this pop-up. This says for 12 turns, there's minus 25 fortification on this city, which I think triggered when they got to the city. Yeah, you've reached the city and you're starting your siege. You can either continue your siege or assassinate the ruler, which is evil, and would start a new event at that point. They chose to, I think, just continue their siege, and then after they took this city, they could support the new ruler, install a new ruler, and it would be at peace with Tempest, it says, but I think it would really be this ruler, Sir something of the Arrow, would become the new ruler of the Stormborn Draconians, and you would be at peace with them. Or you could be evil and you can assassinate him and just try and conquer the capital that you just fought, which makes a lot of sense. If you take out a capital, you probably want to keep it. But yeah, this is an evil action, and when you do that, you get, I think it says Imperium here. Yeah, it says 215 Imperium. We'll zoom in a little bit. And the other option is that you can claim an item off of this guy. So it's a pretty high tier item. This says that you get Siege Master, you get Umbral Malady immunity for all the guys in the army, and you get Demolisher, which I have to admit, those aren't that amazing. Those effects are okay, But the fact that there is no umbral malady on the map means that this is negligible, does nothing. The siege master is good because that'll help you siege down cities faster, but this demolisher, I don't know if I need that on my heroes. I don't know if I need to destroy fortified objects with my heroes. It could have some utility, but generally speaking, I would almost always in this situation take the 215 Imperium. And now we have some other images from later on, I believe. Actually, no, this is from Discord. This is from after the stream. This is a voxel saying this is going to this is going into the mix soon. He just wanted a hybrid defender-esque warrior by using the traits here. I can't quite read that, so let's zoom in a little bit more. This says immobilizing presence at the start of the turn. Adjacent enemies become slowed. If they're already slowed, they become immobilized instead. Okay, I could see that being helpful for a warrior class. You just make it so the guys standing next to you are slowed or immobilized. So if it's a ranged guy, they're just stuck there. If they are a melee guy, slowed I think takes away their retaliation, which can be generally pretty good. But this is at the start of the turn, adjacent enemies will get that. Oh yeah, so you'll just start your turn next to guys and take away their retaliation and then be able to melee strike into them. Not bad at all. Now, I believe this was a screenshot showing off that Cleansing Flame was still in the game. It just works a little bit differently now. This will make it so that slain units create Cleansing Flames for 3 turns and all burning ground is turned into Cleansing Flame. That's just part of the faction now. Underneath this, we have some images that have to do with the 2 different seal bearers being from 2 different devotions in one army. You can have 2 different devotions in one army, and then they're going to have these effects. Somebody's asking about the subculture mixing. They had 2 in the same army, and since no, this is just the 2 different versions. One's got the spirit damage and one's got the fire damage. If we wanted to, we could try and zoom in and see if there's anything else that's different. It looks to me like this is the one that gives spirit damage. So they're playing as righteous, and it did apply that to the guy who does fire damage. Pretty cool. I'm not sure if there's anything else in here that I'm missing, but I'm seeing Warrior Soul listed on this unit, whereas nobility is listed on this one. Yeah, I don't see actually nobility listed over here. Interesting. Maybe I was misunderstanding this a second ago when I saw the spirit damage on the seal bolts, but not sure where else that would come from. Maybe sign of the lumbering staff, but I think that might be, yeah, that's it for those screenshots. We're now ready to take a little bit of a closer look at the design boards with the 5 classes in them. So we're going to start with this one, the Defender class. We do have to zoom in quite a bit to be able to see anything here, but this is just like what we were looking at earlier with the things that you can pick for leveling up. When we are going down the left side of the Defender class, that is the infantry side, the middle is the core, and the right side is shield-like stuff. We have Sentinel, which lets you do plus 20% damage on retaliations and opportunity attacks. After that, we have, I think, 2 choices, which is Frontline Fighter, plus 1 defense, plus 1 resistance against flanking attacks. And then this one is really, really hard to make out, but it looks like to me that it's saying something about a Materium or an Order Tome here. I really can't make it out. It's saying something about extra damage, I think. And it'll take a while to really unpack all of these, so we'll just move on to the other options after that, which is extra resistance. This makes sense. You can also get a pushing attack, which I think we may have seen in one of the dev streams. This will make it so that you can just move people around the battlefield, but it also deals quite a bit of damage. It puts you in defensive mode, and it only has a 1-turn cooldown. After that, we have an aggressive push and a consolidating push. It's basically 2 versions of the pushing attack. You can make it so it does more damage and does displace and replace. I don't see, does this do anything like that? Strike the target and pushes them back. Yeah, this is displace and replace, which is, I think, slightly different. I don't think your guy moves forward when you push them back using the pushing attack. Consolidating push says that the drive back gains heals caster for 20 HP points on use, which is good. That'll keep your aggressive charge units alive a lot longer. Blade Sworn, I think is what that said. At the start of this unit's turn, adjacent enemy units suffer -10 physical damage and bleeding. Well, I'm really glad I can read that looking at how grainy that is. Yeah, defense gives you some evasion here. You can make it so that you get extra damage on melee attacks. If you go down the core stuff here from either the consolidating push or from the defensive path. Retaliator was something that we actually looked at in this video recently. Invigorating retaliation says that you get +1 retaliation whenever you make your retaliation attack. Yes, that's very good. That's a very good. I don't think we had the pushback thing on here somewhere. The retaliating attacks will push people away. That's probably in another path, because just imagine combining that with the ability to get more retaliations every time you retaliate. Or is that say retaliate? No, I think it's regeneration. You get regeneration every time you retaliate. Okay, never mind. That makes more sense. Frenzied retaliation says you get one strengthened whenever you retaliate. Not bad. This is where you get the endless retaliation. Okay, so I was thinking about this interaction a little bit earlier than it came into play. You can get regeneration off of your tireless regeneration if you take this, or you can get strengthened off of your tireless retaliation if you take this. Those are interesting choices. But yeah, unlimited retaliations is very good. I remember that being a very nice in Age of Wonders Planetfall, and it's interesting to see that here with Age of Wonders 4. Now, the middle path is pretty self-explanatory. It has taunt. This says range 4 right now, 1 turn cooldown, and this is maybe got to get weaker because this is the same taunt ability that the Anvil guards I think have, which is well, it's a tier 1 unit, and it's very good on a tier 1 unit. We have defense, resistance, and something that's way too grainy to make out in the middle. Defense and resistance. You can go down these paths. It's interesting. It looks like defense 2 comes after resistance 1, and resistance 2 comes after defense 1. I'm not sure why they built it that way. Weakening Aurora will make it so that guys deal less damage when they are weakened. Graceful defense gives you grace, which is the healing after you take damage. You can get more vigor here, plus 15 HP for a hero point might not be worth it anymore, given that dragons just get that when they get their signature skills. But greater vigor, plus 30 HP, that's probably worth it. I might go for this path to get to 30 HP versus 15 HP to get to 30 HP. Then again, 15 HP is kind of like having 2 things of grace, but you can just keep going into defense mode to get more grace if you're really leaning into the defensive nature of the defender class. And then at the very bottom, it's a something about a single action 2 turn cooldown, defense mode, self and adjacent friendly units gain rally, bolstering defense, bolstering resistance, and a retaliation. I believe that's what that's saying. I'm actually pretty happy with how I'm able to read this, given how grainy it is. Getting all the good info. Brace defense says entering defense mode gives you charge resistance. That's kind of like being a polearm unit, but without the spear itself. That's not bad at all. This says something about defense mode. Defensive masters means that when you end your turn, you go into defense mode. Yes, that's very good to have just on your unit. I think this says something like weakening strikes. You have a 90% chance to weaken. Effects increase for non-repeating attacks. Deflecting defense says you reflect damage back on the attacker. That is okay, but that means that you're going to have to take damage to get any use out of this skill, and I don't love those types of abilities. Then again, this is the defender class, so maybe it's good on them. Pure defense says that you remove 1 negative status effect from this unit and adjacent friendly units. That's not nothing at all. That's actually quite good. Stunning bash means that you can stun units. So there's this taunt in the middle and the left, and then if you go down the right, which is the shield, you can get a stunning bash, which is very nice. It puts you in defense mode and has a fairly high chance of stunning. I think this is actually an ability that's also in a different tier 1 unit. One of them is I think the warrior, and one of them is from the anvil guard. One is from the barbarian class and one is from the industrious class. Warding armor gives you I think +3 resistance. Reinforced armor gives you +3 defense from what I remember, although that does look like a +4 from here. Offensive Vanguard, self and adjacent allies get 10% damage. Resistant thing just gives you extra resistance and status resistance. Defense mode grants you and adjacent allies +2 defense. Makes sense for the beginning part of the shield path for the defender, and I think that's everything here. Everything that I could read. Let's go over the warrior class next. This one has a shock trooper side and a berserker side. The shock trooper starts off with the knight that gives +10 HP, +1 defense, the Berserker thing gives you extra max HP and gives you extra damage. So the Shock Trooper is slightly more defensively focused. Both of them give you max HP, and that's just start by going down the left side. Prepared Charge is something we've seen before. This makes it so that you can get plus 20% damage on your next attack at the start of its turn if it is not engaged. So I think that's just a passive. That means if you're not standing next to somebody at the beginning of your turn, you're going to be able to do a lot more damage with your charge strike. Then you can upgrade that into brutal charge, which says that you get displace and replace on your charge attacks, and they can also inflict sunder armor, or if you wanted to, you could take guarded charge, which puts you in defense mode after you take the charge. There's of course fighter here, which gives you plus 10% melee damage, but we don't really need to talk about that. Distracting charge makes it so that your charge attacks inflict distracted, which will make it easier to flank enemies, which will make it easier to kill them and remove them off of the battlefield. Weakening charge says that you can inflict weakened, which will just reduce their damage output, which is one way to deal with an enemy. Another good way to deal with enemies is to mobilize them. If you want to, you can charge into like a ranged unit or a support unit and just say you're going to stay there, you're immobilized using relentless charge. Now, taunting charges says that charges inflict taunted, which means the enemy can't run away easily. If they're ranged, they still will run away, but they'll probably just go a few hexes away and take 2 attacks versus actually getting away from the scary charge unit. The committed charge says charge attacks grant plus 1 retaliation till the start of their next turn, which means your charge units can have more than 1 retaliation relatively easily. If you go for committed charge, you're going to be able to do those really big charge attacks on your retaliation quite often. Uh, Vigor 2 is just plus 15 HP. That's okay, but I don't know if I love that as a choice. Sweeping Charge says that you can inflict 8 physical damage to enemies adjacent to the target. 8? Only 8? That seems so low that I can't see how that would ever be worth it. Greater defense gives you extra defense and evasion. Unyielding gives you extra defense at the start of this unit's turn, and you can dispel 1 negative status effect. Graceful Charge says that the attack grants plus 2 grace. We already talked about grace and how that works. This is actually very similar to the way the defender gets grace. It got 2 things of grace too. The Willbreaker says that you gain Vicious Killer, which means that when you kill an enemy, I think that it makes the enemies sadder than it normally would. On adjacent enemy units, they will also suffer weakened and remorse. So yeah, when you kill an enemy, then they will also get a little bit weaker. They will deal less damage, and remorse I think takes away their morale, which can make them rout earlier or lead to fumbles, which is a good way to mitigate damage. Second Wind is very good. Yes, this is a 3-turn cooldown. Starts use heals for 15 HP, gives plus 8 movement points, slippery, and refreshes on a kill. So if you get a kill before the 3-turn cooldown is over, you can use this pretty early in a battle. But it's more about things. It's more for later in a fight when um, you might need just a little bit of movement to be able to take out a unit. You can use this to get that movement, but then you won't be able to use that on the next turn unless you're able to kill an enemy, and then it's just something you can chain really efficiently, just getting lots and lots of second wins from taking out the important units. It makes a lot of sense to me thematically why that would give you more energy. Frenzy says you get extra strength on hits, so that's when you hit enemies, you get strength. And I don't think it's when you get hit by enemies you get stronger, but it could be that I'm missing something here. There's also Sundering Strikes, attacks inflict guaranteed sunder, increases for non-repeating attacks. Not sure what this is saying, but it looks like it's saying keen something maybe. Gives you crit chance. Yeah, 20% crit chance. I think I remember that one as a barbarian thing. And then there's, I think, something in here that does sundered resistance. It's a range 6 at least from red, so it's chaos. I'm not too sure what that is. We can just move on to execute. Execute says it's a thing that can instantly kill a unit as a 2-turn cooldown, range 1. Critical momentum is something I remember them showing off and talking about quite a bit. Every time you crit, you can heal for 10 HP, gain hasten for 3 turns, which is really, really good because you can really, if you get the extra crit chance here, which is how you get to the critical momentum and a couple other sources of crit chance, you can crit pretty consistently, especially if you have good morale. Berserkers something says that you get I don't know what this is. I think steadfast maybe and berserk when you get below a certain HP, so it keeps your guy on the battlefield longer, but you can't control what targets they attack. I believe with berserkers rage, I believe is what that says there. And I can't quite make this one out, but it looks like maybe a shadow thing, grim executioner Yeah, it's something about fortune. I think when you kill a unit, you should be able to get fortune, which is extra crit chance. Undying gives your unit resurgence, which means if they die in battle, they can come back after the battle. But I think they don't get the XP if they resurge, so that's probably not amazing on a hero, but could be very useful. You can like run your guy further forward, not worry about them dying as much, and get some good use out of them. Okay, so we did cover Greater Vigor on the other one. There it is again. Brutal Parry, I remember covering in other dev streams. We covered Willbreaker. Don't remember if we covered Unyielding. This gives you extra resistance at the start of this unit's turn. You get to dispel a negative stat effect. That's pretty good. That's pretty neat. Oh, and it says new here. I hadn't even noticed all these little things. New, new, new. What does that say underneath new? New something rather. Work Seeker says on kill you get 10 HP and you get 10% extra damage until the end of combat. So it just makes you stronger and stronger and stronger. So long as you go down the right or the middle path, you should be able to get to War Seeker. In fact, actually, if you go up this way, you can go through this path, from this path, from this path to get there. So I guess that's one reason you might want to take Vigor 2, because it just lets you go from the left side of the tree over to the right side where it has some cool stuff. And of course, killing momentum, we all know this. It's very good. So yeah, I think that's everything from this one. So we'll go over the Ranger class next, and one of the really interesting things about this one is it does have two clear sides, the Archer side and the Skirmisher side, but this middle path, I believe, is a little bit thinner than some of the other classes. But that's mostly because there's a lot more choices for the Archer and Skirmisher path. From what I can tell, that seems to be the way they've designed this one. The first three choices for the Archer side are the Scattershot, True Shot, and Snapshot. I already mentioned the Snapshot as something I'm a fan of in this video. This is the free action one turn cooldown that does a pretty decent amount of damage. The True Shot is range 6, full action, does a lot of damage, and the Scatter Shot is an AoE. You can upgrade these a few different ways. Piercing Shot can only go on Scatter Shot and True Shot. This will make it so that they get breaching and piercing. You can't apply that to Snapshot. Snapshot gets different choices. Snapshot can either go with knockback Snapshot, which will knock the enemy back 1 hex, as long as they're not a large unit. And then there is disruptive Snapshot. Snapshot now cancels defensive mode. So this could be very good for disrupting the enemy line, or just making it so that you can get next to the enemy to deal a lot of damage more easily. It's knocking things out of defense mode is kind of reserved for charge attacks and a few other abilities. So having that on a range attack is very nice. My asthma shot, I think, is what this is saying, which I think applies weakened, but I can't really make out the rest of this here. It seems like it inflicts something in an area, and there may be something else that's secondary to it. I believe we got a picture of this in one of the other things. We don't need to really linger on it. This is a type of hunter. You get +1 physical damage per negative stats effect on the target. I think that's Culling Hunter. We have Swarm Hunter and Big Game Hunter, which we have seen before. Swarm Hunter is +1 damage for each unit next to the target, increased for non-repeating attacks. The Big Game Hunter is it's similar, but I think it does more damage per tier of the target unit. So this works really, really well against heroes. Over here we have Ensnaring Hunter, which says attacks gain 50% chance to inflict immobilize, which will keep them where they are, making it harder for melee guys to chase down your ranged hero, or to make it so that support units and range units can't get away from your melee guys. Which, if this guy has the right gear, he can have like the sword and crossbow that I mentioned earlier, or the sword and pistol, which is both a ranged attack and a melee strike. Or at least I think this class should be able to use those weapons. I believe they're designed as a bit of a skirmisher type weapon. And the right side over here, this is the skirmisher side. All right, let's go back down this path that we started going down. Plague Shot is something we haven't covered yet. Plague Shot says that range abilities now have a 50% to inflict disease to target and adjacent enemies. This is really good if your army does any magic damage, and if it doesn't, if you're only really dealing physical damage, it's just a risk, because they can always pass the disease back to you, and then your guys will have like -4 resistance. They'll take like 50% more damage from any magic attack, and that's super dangerous. Thorn Shot is something I remember talking about earlier. Yeah, this can inflict bleeding on the adjacent enemies, I believe is what it says. Target and adjacent enemies. Kill Shot says you refresh when you kill an enemy. Is that the only one that is like that. I forget what we talked about in all the other ones, but this is really good. It's really strong, refreshing your stuff. Yeah, I think I remember mentioning that you can use that with a snapshot pretty efficiently, or in theory, it looks like you should be able to. Barrage attack says the third attack will inflict a third attack in a turn, kind of like the stunning thing in the Tome of Discipline. This will inflict 12 physical damage to target and all adjacent enemies. That reminds me of actually more of how the monk triple attacks. When they get to the third attack, they do an AoE with spirit damage. Sniper Focus says that if you don't move, you get extra range, and then down here it says if you don't move, you get extra accuracy. I want to say, yeah, if they start their turn outside of engagement range. Oh, it's not even if they don't move. This is if they don't move. This is if they just aren't. Oh, no, no, it does say until it moves. Got it, got it. That's important. Invigorate Takedown says on a kill, you get regeneration and strengthened for 3 turns. If you take that, you're going down the middle path here. You're not going for the other stuff. Yeah, this is slip away right there. It's kind of hard to read, but I know what slip away looks like. I'm a very big fan of that interaction. Mastered Focus says this unit starts outside of engagement range, then they gain a stack of Mastered Focus, which is plus 20% damage, and then this is lost if the unit moves. So you can get extra range, accuracy, and damage if you take the last few things down the left side of the archer path for the ranger. We have this generic stuff in here, which will give you more damage and then more defense and evasion. And right before slipaway, it says you can get melee and range attacks gain 10% more damage. You gain 1 defense and 1 evasion. It's just like a better upgraded version of these defenses. Now we can move over to the skirmisher side, which says melee training, melee attacks inflict guaranteed sundered armor, double for single actions. Yeah, we've seen stuff like that before. Skirmisher training gives you 20% evasion against ranged attacks, but not melee. You can't dodge melee strikes with this ability, which is really interesting because I know that this evasion can allow you to avoid the melee strikes of enemies. It's quite good to have some evasion on your guys, and it looks like you can actually stack up quite a bit. That's going to be 10% there, 10% there, and then another 10% there. That's 30% evasion, including against melee strikes from, unless I'm missing something here. There's also this thing over here that says critical reserve. You can get plus 10% crit chance. That will lead you to critical skirmisher, which says you get just 10% crit chance until the end of combat every time you land a critical strike. And then I think that leads into the healing thing that we mentioned earlier. You can get a fortunate takedown, which means you get fortune on killing a unit. Evasive strikes is something we mentioned earlier. Versatile skirmisher, something we mentioned earlier. Ranking skirmisher? Flanking skirmisher. Flanking attacks do 20% more damage. Blood trail, I think is what this says. Flanking attacks inflict bleeding and marked. Very interesting. We haven't seen that one yet. I think that's definitely different. Exploit weakness says you get plus 20% increased damage to targets with negative status effects. So just as long as they have 1, you can do plus 20% damage. This guy's going to be able to deal so much damage with all these modifiers after you've leveled him up a few times. Skirmisher defense says retaliation attacks inflict knockback. Yeah, so you can't get the infinite retaliation knockback from what I'm seeing here, but you do have knockback in the ranger tree, and you do have infinite retaliation in the defender tree. Or sorry, you have the knockback in, yeah, the ranger tree and the infinite retaliations in defender. I hope I said that right the first time. Maybe I just said the same thing twice. Critical second wind says that you get strengthened and plus 20 HP on a crit. Yeah, we've seen that I think before. Opening strike says that you get lethality attack damage increase depending on how much or it's I think it's going to go down if they have reduced health. So if they have a lot of health, is you're going to deal more damage with the opening strike, and then fatal strike would be the other way around. You get more damage if they're missing health. And then go for the kill says it's a free action with a 2-turn cooldown. Until the end of that turn, you get plus 50% damage. Very good. That's going to lead to you dealing a lot of damage if you can stack this up with a lot of the other modifiers. Let's take a look at the Ritualist class next. We have one more after this, the Mage class, and these are the 2 magic-based classes. The support side of the Ritualist thing actually has 2 branches, and the summoning side of the Ritualist class has 2 branches. The support has restoration over here, and then druidic type things with the wild growths and this right side of the support, and then summoning has a general summoner thing and a necromancer summoner variant. Now let's go through the support side first. Restore can work the way it used to on a cooldown of 2. I want to say range 3 or 4 is how it used to work. And when you upgrade it, you can make it so that your support abilities give you 10 additional temporary HP. You can make it so that support abilities give regeneration, or you can do a third thing, which I can't make out here. I'm so far it has to. I'm sure it has something to do with getting more HP out of things like restoration. If you take the left side, you can take empowered restoration, which says restoration grants 20 HP points against, gives you strengthened, and its range is increased by +4. If I remember correctly, I think this was 4, and then you can go up to basically 8 range on your restoration, but it's single target if you take this option. The overflowing restoration is saying that it turns into a 1 hex AoE. That's really, really nice. That sounds super useful. It sounds like the revitalization that was in, I want to say, Tome of Fertility. A lot of people were saying on Discord recently that they don't see themselves ever taking it because you can get revitalization very quickly through the Ritualist path here. Then we have, I think this says Swift Restoration. This says there's no cooldown uh, per turn. Once per turn, you can use it once per turn. There's no cooldown, but you can use it once per turn. Restoration leaves 1 action point when used. Master of Healing says army gains an additional bit of HP. I think it says 15 HP per turn outside of combat. Oh, so they just regenerate their health faster on the strategic level, I think is what that's saying. Resurrecting Restoration, I think, says target friendly unit can come back from the dead with 60% of their HP. So I have to say the overflowing one seems the best, but restoring the dead does have a lot of utility. Then again, wasn't there a dragon thing that just did that on like a breath or something? Undying Loyalty says that they gain Steadfast for 1 turn. Steadfast is good. That'll keep them alive unless the Steadfast can be removed for at least 1 turn. They should be able to stay alive a little bit longer. There's a cooldown of 4 on the old version of Undying Loyalty, but it might be a bit different in the Tiger update that we get on November 5th. Okay, so this is the restoration side. Let's move over to Wild Growth, which has 2 little branches here, one that says, I think, rejuvenating, and one that's hostile, one that helps your friends and one that hurts your enemies. This looks like it afflicts poisoned and maybe bleeding on hostile units, and it does 15 damage as well. This one, the rejuvenating one, looks like it gives you regeneration, friendly units gain temporary hit points, and I feel like this is not exclusive with the AoE um, heal that you get through restoration. So you can get a lot of sources of healing through the Ritualist if you wanted to. Fortifying Wild Growth will give you +2 bolstering defense. The enveloping Wild Growth will make it so that enemies are inflicted and they are blinded. I feel like it with the evasion bonus you get for standing in foliage, you probably get more utility out of the healing, but there could be some cool things over here that I'm missing. Swift Wild Growth says that Wild Growth is now a full action, and Conjure Wild Growth cooldown is reduced by -1. Maybe there's something else I'm missing here. It's just something you can do faster. Living Wild Growth says Conjure Wild Growth will now summon in 3 living vines in the target area. So you'll get the foliage, but you'll also get the living vines, which can immobilize guys, keeping them kind of stuck in that foliage, or probably away from the rest of the army. If you place this on one part of an enemy army, it's going to be hard for them to form up everybody to be closer to one another because they have less movement. Now, reclaiming strikes is something that you can get here from either getting Undying Loyalty first, or you can go through the um, Wild Growth or Master of Healing. This says that I think you're going to heal some temporary hit points is what I'm reading right there. I'm not quite sure exactly how much and how that would work. It says something about attack, so maybe it's an attack that heals. Supporting resistance says that you get +1 resistance, +2 status resistance. Defense mode gives you +1 resistance and extra status resistance to adjacent allies. So that's very good. You'll be able to support guys a lot more. This works very similar. It just does, I think, more of the same. Yeah, in fact, I don't see any numbers that have changed in between this one and this level, and at level 3 you do get a little bit more status resistance. This gives you more resistance and +1, so I think that'd be like +4 for going into defense mode, as well as giving +4 to everybody else around you, +4 resistance and a bunch of status resistance. Now this is blocked off by a circle. But that looks like it applies regeneration and hastened. It's once per battle, and not sure what else it does. Probably something about support abilities, just giving you a lot of good stuff, right? This does seem like the support side of the Ritualist path, so I wouldn't be too surprised by that. Now the Summoner says that you can conjure in an Astral Ward, which I think doesn't do attacks. It just kind of like allows you to mitigate damage from going onto one of your guys. You can just move it onto the Astral Ward. And then let's just go through the Summoner thing before we go through the undead stuff. We have Fortified Summons. Summoned units get plus 10 HP. I'm not sure if that would work on the Living Vines over here, but I think it should be able to work like that. I think it's more for just like other little summons like spiders that you get from items and things like that. You can conjure in a lesser snow spirit for full action, um, and and then you continue with one action point. The summon is a random tier 1 spirit at the beginning of combat, and then there's something over here that says you can conjure in a greater spirit, I think, and it works pretty much the same way. This will be based off of hero affinity dedication if possible. So it's not random there. You can actually affect it a little bit. I think this is Astral Ward or something like that. It says that you can give them, I think, retaliation attacks, accuracy, and one other effect I can't quite read here. But that's the thing you get after. Oh, this is you can target a friendly magic origin unit to make them better. I think that makes a lot of sense. And underneath here, that's too grainy for me to make out. We'll just move over to the undead to cover the fact that you can raise undead right here, range 4. This will just turn one unit into a zombie, and this is, I think, once per battle. I don't think I can see a cooldown associated with it. We have Soul Keeper after that, summon in a tier 1 zombie unit at the start of combat. I think that should only last 3 turns. A lot of these summons usually only last 3 turns. You can upgrade that to be a Bone Wyvern if you really want to. And then this next point after Soul Keeper is Invested Summons. They gain the ability to spread disease. They have disease and disease immunity, so they won't die faster from that disease, but they can apply it to enemies who can then apply it to you. Seems kind of risky, but I think the thing that's good about this is it leads towards Dark Ritual, which was one of the most popular signature skills before the Tiger update, and I think this still will be very popular because it just lets you spawn in a lot of units that then will apply decaying to your enemies. The last class we're going to look at today is the Mage class, and I already talked a little bit about this class earlier in the video from the screenshots that we got at the end of the dev stream, but there's a few more details in here that I wanted to try and make sure we didn't forget to highlight, so bear with me. We're going to start with the Devastator side here and then move over to the Warlock. We saw the Fiery evocation and the Lightning evocation earlier in this video, and I believe we saw the fact that you can apply burning and that you can apply lightning effects in the tree here. Oh, right, no, this is saying this will apply burning here. Cascading is the one that will take it from an AoE into something different from what I understand. Devastating evocation means that, yeah, it basically makes it so you deal more damage. Sundering evocation is something we covered. I don't remember if we covered the fact that you can get blind here. It does seem vaguely familiar. I think we did. Fan the Flames has been covered once. Wildfire says slain enemies explode, inflicting 10 fire damage to adjacent enemies and inflicting burning. That I don't believe we covered earlier. That's pretty cool. You can get extra crit chance and accuracy on your maximized magic. And oh boy, what does this say? I think this is the displace one that we mentioned earlier. Yeah, that one looks familiar, so we won't spend a lot of time looking at that. Devouring Spell says that this is a once per combat range 3 lightning damage on something on fail, and the healer it heals the caster for 20 HP, gives you strengthened, and refreshes all ability cooldowns. I don't remember seeing that earlier, so I'm glad that we mentioned that quickly. I do remember Arcane Strength and Distant Evocation and this stuff. This seems all very familiar to me. Yeah, Channeling Power is quite nice, and from here, let's just move on to, what does it say? Spell is a circle and point, and amplification is a swirl. Oh, that's cool that they changed the icons to reflect that a little bit. The curse is going to have like two little paths. You can take it down. One that does the disease. It has a 90% chance to inflict disease on all magic attacks here, or you can make it so that you have a 90% chance to weaken your enemy. You can disrupt them, which I don't remember covering earlier. Disruption, I think, disables their enchantments and in general makes them a lot easier to deal with. So having that being something that you can get off of your curse is very nice. It only takes a few levels to get there. And then the Hacks of Decay says debuff abilities now have a 90% to apply decay. So this is not just on the curse. This is actually on all debuff abilities, both for Hex of Decay and for Hex of Disruption. The Mass Curse says that curse turns into an AoE, and the Frost Curse is the one that we mentioned earlier, the one that can inflict freeze, which is interesting because I think, yeah, this isn't an upgraded version of the curse. This is just something different, isn't it? It can then um, make it so that you can stun a bunch of units if you get close to the enemy because it's only range 3. It is a full action continue, so maybe you do have a teleport after you get close to the enemy, but it's generally pretty risky. And if I remember correctly, I think that's everything in this tree. Yeah, thanks for joining me today. I'll see you around. Have a good one.